Alexander sat back in his leather chair, swirling the expensive wine in his glass as he looked around the exclusive private dining room. The crystal chandelier cast warm light over the mahogany table where 5 successful men shared their monthly dinner. These weren't just any businessmen. They were the elite, the ones who had made it to the top of their industries before turning 40. Tonight felt different, though. The usual talk about stock prices and business deals had taken a sharp turn into something more personal. Robert, his oldest friend from college, had been unusually quiet all evening. Finally, he put down his fork and looked directly at Alexander. "You know what your problem is?" Robert said, his voice cutting through the comfortable atmosphere. "You've completely lost touch with reality." Alexander raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. At 34, he was the youngest billionaire in the room, having built his tech empire from nothing. Well, almost nothing. His father's connections and a small loan of $5 million had certainly helped. But Alexander preferred to forget those details. Lost touch with reality? Alexander laughed. "I think my bank account says otherwise. Last I checked, my company was worth $12 billion. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Robert shot back. "You think money is the only measure of success. You think anyone who works a regular job is somehow beneath you." The other men at the table shifted uncomfortably. They all knew Alexander's reputation for being ruthless in business and dismissive of what he called ordinary people. It was a running joke among their circle, but tonight Robert seemed genuinely angry. "Come on, Robert," Alexander said, taking another sip of his wine. "Are you really going to lecture me about success? I didn't get where I am by being soft. I got here because I'm smarter and work harder than everyone else." "Harder?" Robert's voice rose slightly. "When's the last time you actually worked hard? When's the last time you did anything that didn't involve sitting in a conference room or flying in your private jet?" Alexander's jaw tightened. He didn't like being challenged, especially not in front of their friends. "I work 18-hour days running a global company. I make decisions that affect thousands of employees and millions of customers. That's real work." "That's management," Robert corrected. "I'm talking about real work. Physical work. The kind where you're on your feet all day, dealing with difficult people for $8 an hour plus tips. The kind where you can't afford to make mistakes because you might not be able to pay rent." The table fell silent. Alexander could feel the eyes of their friends watching this confrontation unfold. He hated losing face in front of anyone, but especially this group. "You think I couldn't handle that kind of work?" Alexander's voice was calm, but there was ice in his tone. "You think I couldn't excel at any job I chose to do?" "Honestly, no, I don't think you could," Robert said bluntly. "I think you'd quit within a week, maybe less." Alexander set down his wine glass with a sharp click. "You want to bet on that?" "Actually, yes," Robert said, leaning forward. "I do." The other men at the table exchanged glances. They all knew that when Alexander and Robert made bets, things got serious. These two had been competing since their freshman year at Harvard Business School, and their wagers had become legendary among their circle. "What did you have in mind?" Alexander asked, his competitive instincts fully engaged now. Robert smiled, but there was no warmth in it. 2 weeks. You work as a waiter at a real restaurant, not some high-end place where your connections might help you. A regular diner or family restaurant. You earn minimum wage plus tips just like everyone else. You can't use your real name or let anyone know who you really are. Alexander almost laughed. "That's it? 2 weeks of carrying plates around? This is easier than I thought." "I'm not finished," Robert continued. "You have to last the full 2 weeks without quitting. No calling in sick unless you're actually in the hospital. No special treatment. And here's the kicker. You have to maintain a positive attitude. If you get fired for being rude to customers or coworkers, you lose." "And what happens when I win?" Alexander asked confidently. "If you actually last 2 weeks and don't get fired, I'll donate $500,000 to any charity you choose," Robert said. "But when you quit or get fired, you donate $1 million to a workers' rights organization. And you have to publicly admit that you were wrong about service workers." The room was dead quiet now. $1 million wasn't a huge amount for Alexander, but the public admission would hurt his reputation. He prided himself on never being wrong about anything. "Make it interesting," Alexander said after a moment. "When I win, you don't just donate to charity. You also have to work in my company's mailroom for a month. Let's see how you handle real corporate pressure." Robert extended his hand across the table. "Deal." Alexander shook it firmly, already planning his victory speech. "This is going to be the easiest $1 million you've ever lost." Their friend James, who had been quietly watching the exchange, cleared his throat. "You guys are serious about this?" "Dead serious," both men said at the same time. "Then we need rules," James said, pulling out his phone. "Alexander, you can't use any of your resources or connections. No designer clothes that might give you away. No expensive car to drive to work. You need to actually live like someone who works for minimum wage." Alexander waved dismissively. Fine, I'll play dress up and pretend to be poor for 2 weeks. How hard can it be?" Thomas, another friend at the table, shook his head. "Alex, I think you're underestimating this. Service work is physically demanding, and dealing with difficult customers all day isn't easy." "Please," Alexander scoffed. "I've dealt with difficult people my entire career. The only difference is these customers will be ordering food instead of demanding quarterly reports." Robert pulled out his own phone and started typing. "I'm already looking up places for you to apply. There's a family diner downtown called Rosie's Place. Perfect spot. Busy working-class clientele, no-nonsense management." "Wait," said David, the quietest member of their group. "What if Alexander actually learned something from this experience?" Alexander laughed loudly. "Learn something? The only thing I'm going to learn is how easy it is to succeed when you actually apply yourself. These people just don't have what it takes to rise above their circumstances." "And what if you're wrong?" David pressed. "I'm never wrong about people," Alexander said confidently. "Success is about mindset. It's about being willing to do whatever it takes to win. Most people just don't have that drive." Robert finished typing on his phone and looked up. "Rosie's Place is hiring. They need waitstaff immediately. You start Monday morning." "This Monday?" Alexander asked, suddenly realizing how soon this was happening. "Having second thoughts already?" Robert asked with a grin. "Not a chance," Alexander said, his pride flaring up again. "I'll show you exactly what real leadership looks like even in a diner." As the evening wound down and the men prepared to leave, Alexander felt a surge of excitement. This bet was going to be easier than taking candy from a child. He'd waltz into that diner, charm the customers with his natural charisma, and probably end up running the place within a week. Walking to his Bentley in the restaurant's valet area, Alexander was already planning how he'd spend Robert's $500,000 donation. Maybe he'd start a scholarship fund in his own name. That would be good publicity. He had no idea that in less than 72 hours, his entire worldview would begin to crumble. The man who thought he understood everything about success and failure was about to get the education of his lifetime from people he'd never bothered to notice before. As he drove home to his penthouse apartment, Alexander smiled to himself. 2 weeks of pretending to be ordinary, and then he'd be back to his real life with another victory under his belt and proof that he was right about everything. He couldn't have been more wrong. Monday morning came faster than Alexander expected. Standing outside Rosie's Place at 6:30 in the morning, he felt completely out of his element. The diner looked like something from a movie. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and neon signs that had seen better days. Through the windows he could see people already bustling around, preparing for the breakfast rush. Alexander had spent the weekend shopping for what he thought were appropriate clothes. He'd bought jeans and a plain t-shirt from a department store, though even his attempt at dressing down screamed expensive. The jeans were perfectly pressed, his sneakers were spotless white leather, and his watch, well, he'd forgotten to take off his $50,000 Rolex. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door. A bell chimed, and immediately the smell of bacon and coffee hit him. The place was already half full with early morning customers, construction workers grabbing coffee before their shifts, elderly couples sharing breakfast, and a few people who looked like they hadn't slept all night. "You must be Alex," came a gruff voice from behind the counter. A stocky man in his 50s approached, wiping his hands on a stained apron. "I'm Tony, the manager. Robert called and said you needed work." Alexander nodded, trying to look humble. "Yes, sir. I really appreciate the opportunity." Tony looked him up and down with skeptical eyes. Something about this guy didn't add up. His hands were too soft, his posture too confident. But they were desperately short-staffed, and Robert had vouched for him. "You ever waited tables before?" Tony asked. "Well, not exactly," Alexander admitted. "But I'm a fast learner and I work hard." Tony snorted. "We'll see about that. Luna," he called out to a young woman rushing between tables with practiced efficiency. "Come here for a second." Luna approached, balancing a coffee pot in one hand and a stack of plates in the other. She was around 28, with tired eyes but a genuine smile. Her uniform was spotless despite the chaos around her, and Alexander noticed how every customer she passed seemed to light up when she acknowledged them. "This is Alex," Tony said. "He's starting today. I want you to train him, but don't go easy on him. We don't have time for hand-holding." Luna looked at Alexander with curious eyes. Like Tony, she sensed something was off. His clothes might be plain, but everything about him screamed privilege. The way he stood, the way he looked around the diner like he was studying a foreign country, it was all wrong. "Nice to meet you," she said politely, extending her hand. Alexander shook it, surprised by how firm her grip was and how calloused her palms felt. "First things first," Luna said, leading him behind the counter. "You need to learn the layout. Kitchen's back there, coffee station here, register there. Memorize where everything is because when we get busy you won't have time to think." She handed him an apron and order pad. "Put these on. The apron goes over your head and ties in the back. The order pad goes in your front pocket with a pen." Alexander fumbled with the apron strings, something he'd never had to do in his life. Luna watched patiently, then helped him adjust it properly. The simple act of someone helping him with something so basic was oddly humbling. "Now see those tables?" Luna pointed around the diner. "Each section has 4 tables. You'll start with section 1, tables 1 through 4. Each table has different needs, different timing. Your job is to keep everyone happy." It sounded simple enough. Alexander had managed teams of hundreds of people. How hard could 4 tables be? The answer came within the first hour. By 8 o'clock, the breakfast rush was in full swing, and Alexander was drowning. At table 2, an elderly man had been waiting 10 minutes for his coffee refill. At table 4, a woman was asking about Eggs Benedict, which apparently wasn't on the menu. At table 1, a construction worker wanted his eggs over easy, but Alexander had forgotten to specify that to the kitchen. "Order up," shouted Carlos the cook, ringing a bell aggressively. Alexander looked at the plates under the heat lamps, completely confused. Which order belonged to which table? He'd already mixed up 2 orders, sending a pancake stack to someone who'd ordered scrambled eggs. Luna appeared beside him like an angel. "Take a breath," she said calmly. "The ticket tells you the table number, see? Table 3 ordered the bacon. And eggs." Alexander grabbed the plates, his hands shaking slightly from stress. He'd never felt so incompetent in his life. At his company, he commanded respect with every word. Here, he couldn't even remember if table 2 wanted wheat or white toast. Walking to table 3, he tried to balance the plates the way he'd seen Luna do it. Halfway there, disaster struck. The plates were heavier than expected, and his grip wasn't secure. One plate slipped, sending scrambled eggs and hash browns sliding off the edge. The plate crashed to the floor with a loud clatter that made the entire diner go quiet for a moment. Alexander stood there staring at the mess, his face burning with embarrassment. In his boardroom, mistakes were handled quietly and efficiently. Here, everyone was looking at him. "It happens to everyone," Luna said, appearing with a broom and dustpan. Don't worry about it, but Alexander was worrying about it. His back was already aching from being on his feet. His feet hurt in his new shoes, and he'd only been working for 2 hours. How did people do this all day? "Table 6 needs their check," Luna said, handing him a receipt. "Just tear it off the Pat and give it to them. And smile. They've been good customers. Alexander approached table 6 where a young couple sat with their toddler. The little boy had made a considerable mess with his pancakes and syrup was everywhere. The parents looked tired but happy. "Here's your check," Alexander said, placing it on the sticky table. The man looked up at him expectantly. Alexander stood, there for a moment, unsure what to do next. "Thank you," the woman said pointedly. Alexander nodded and started to walk away. "Excuse me," the man called out. "Could we get some wet wipes for the little guy? And maybe a to-go cup for the orange juice?" Alexander had no idea where wet wipes were kept, or if they even had to-go cups. In his world, assistants handled these details. Here, he was the assistant. "I'll find those for you," he said, hoping he sounded confident. 20 minutes later, after searching through every cabinet and asking Luna for help twice, he returned with the wet wipes and discovered the family had already left. No tip. By lunchtime, Alexander was exhausted in a way he'd never experienced. His designer jeans were stained with coffee and ketchup. His back ached constantly. His feet felt like they were on fire. He'd mixed up more orders, spilled 2 more plates, and earned exactly $12 in tips. $12 for 6 hours of work. At his company, he made more than that in the time it took to blink. During his break, Alexander sat in the employee area behind the kitchen, staring at the crumpled bills in his hand. Luna sat down across from him, eating a quick sandwich. "Rough first day?" she asked with a knowing smile. "I had no idea it would be this hard," Alexander admitted, too tired to maintain his fake confidence. Luna studied his face. "Can I ask you something? What did you do before this?" Alexander panicked for a moment. "I was between jobs, corporate stuff. Nothing interesting." Luna nodded, but her expression said she didn't entirely believe him. "Well, corporate stuff doesn't prepare you for this. This job is about reading people, staying organized under pressure, and taking care of others even when you're exhausted." "How do you do it?" Alexander asked genuinely. "How do you make it look so easy?" Luna laughed, but not unkindly. "Practice, and remembering that every customer is someone's parent or child or friend. They're not just table numbers. They're people, having a moment in their day, and you're part of that moment." Alexander had never thought about customers that way. In his business, clients were revenue streams, deals to be closed, contracts to be signed. The idea that each person at each table had a whole life, with problems and joys and stories, was completely foreign to him. "Plus," Luna added, standing up to return to work, "the money matters. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, every dollar counts. Every tip helps pay rent or groceries or your kids' school supplies." As she walked away, Alexander realized something that shook him to his core. Luna wasn't just good at this job because she was naturally skilled. She was good at it because she had to be. Because her life depended on it. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander began to understand what real pressure felt like. By Thursday morning, Alexander was starting to understand the rhythm of the diner. His body still ached every morning when he woke up in his penthouse apartment, but at least he wasn't dropping plates anymore. He'd learned to balance 3 plates on his left arm while carrying a coffee pot in his right hand. It wasn't graceful, but it worked. More importantly, he was beginning to see Luna differently. What he'd initially mistaken for simple friendliness was actually incredible skill. She could remember 6 different orders without writing them down, know exactly how each regular customer liked their coffee, and somehow make everyone feel like they were her only priority. "Morning, Alex," Luna said as he tied his apron. She looked tired today, more so than usual. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "You okay?" Alexander asked, surprising himself with how much he actually cared about the answer. Luna smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just a long night. My daughter had trouble sleeping." This was the first time Luna had mentioned having a child. Alexander felt a jolt of curiosity mixed with respect. She was raising a kid while working these long shifts? He couldn't imagine the exhaustion. "How old is she?" he asked while they restocked the coffee station together. 6, Luna said, her voice softening. "Her name's Sophia. She's starting first grade next month and she's nervous about it. Kept crawling into my bed saying she was scared. Alexander tried to picture Luna as a mother, comforting a frightened child after working a 12-hour shift. The image made something twist in his chest. At Sophia's age, he'd had nannies and private tutors. Luna was probably both mother and father to her daughter. Is her dad around? Alexander asked, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that's none of my business. It's okay, Luna said, refilling the sugar dispensers. He left when she was 2, said he wasn't ready to be a father. She shrugged like it didn't matter, but Alexander could hear the old hurt in her voice. The morning rush started, and Alexander threw himself into the work with new determination. He found himself watching Luna even more carefully, noticing things he'd missed before, like how she always checked on the elderly couple in booth 7, making sure they had everything they needed, or how she slipped extra bacon to the construction worker who always looked exhausted. Small kindnesses that cost nothing but meant everything. Around 10 o'clock, things got challenging. A businessman in an expensive suit sat down in Alexander's section, immediately demanding attention with loud snaps of his fingers. Alexander recognized the type. He'd been that type just a week ago. Coffee, black, and make it quick, the man barked without looking up from his phone. And I want fresh eggs, Benedict. If it takes more than 10 minutes, I'm leaving. Alexander started to explain that they didn't serve eggs, Benedict, but the man cut him off with an impatient wave. Figure it out. I don't have time for excuses. While Alexander was struggling with this difficult customer, he noticed Luna dealing with her own challenge. An older woman in booth 4 was upset about her order, claiming her toast was too dark and her eggs were cold. But instead of getting defensive or frustrated, Luna listened carefully. You're absolutely right, Mrs. Patterson, Luna said warmly. Let me get Carlos to make you fresh eggs, and I'll make sure your toast is exactly how you like it. Would you like some fresh coffee while you wait? Alexander watched, amazed, as Luna turned an angry customer into a smiling one. Mrs. Patterson was actually thanking Luna by the time she left. Meanwhile, Alexander's businessman was getting more aggressive. This is ridiculous, he said loudly. Where's my coffee? Do I need to speak to a manager? Other customers were starting to stare. Alexander felt his face burning with embarrassment and anger. This was exactly the kind of treatment he used to dish out to service workers. The realization made him sick. Sir, I apologize for the delay, Alexander said, forcing himself to stay calm. Your coffee is coming right up. Don't apologize, just do your job, the man snapped. Some of us have real work to do. That comment hit Alexander like a physical blow. Real work? He'd been on his feet for 4 hours straight, his back was killing him, and he'd already dealt with a dozen different customers' needs and complaints. This was real work. Luna appeared beside him with a fresh pot of coffee. I've got this, she said quietly, then turned to the businessman with her professional smile. Good morning, sir. I'm so sorry about the wait. Here's your coffee, and I've asked our cook to prepare something special for you since we don't have eggs Benedict on the menu. Something in Luna's tone worked magic. The businessman actually looked up from his phone and seemed to really see her for the first time. Oh, well, thank you, that's very thoughtful. After the man left with a decent tip, Alexander noticed, he turned to Luna in amazement. How do you do that? How do you stay so calm with people like that? Luna shrugged. He's probably having a bad day. Maybe his boss yelled at him, or he's stressed about money, or his wife is mad at him. Everyone's fighting some kind of battle. Alexander stared at her. He'd never considered that the people who were rude to him might be dealing with their own problems. In his world, rudeness was just weakness or bad character. During their lunch break, Alexander found himself really talking to Luna for the first time. They sat in the small employee break room, sharing stories about their morning customers. You know what I love about this job? Luna said, eating her sandwich. You get to be part of people's lives even in small ways. Like Mr. Johnson comes in every Tuesday after his chemotherapy. He always orders chocolate chip pancakes because his wife used to make them for him. She passed away last year. Alexander felt something shift inside his chest. I never thought about customers having stories like that. Everyone has a story, Luna said simply. Mrs. Chen brings her granddaughter here every Saturday morning. It's their special time together. The Rodriguez family saves up to come here for their son's birthday every year. That teenager who comes in after school, he works 2 jobs to help his mom pay bills. As Luna talked, Alexander began to see the diner differently. It wasn't just a business serving food. It was a gathering place, a small community where people's lives intersected. And the staff weren't just order takers. They were caretakers, memory keepers, small bright spots in people's days. "What about you?" Alexander asked. "What's your story?" Luna was quiet for a moment. "I got pregnant when I was 22. I was supposed to start nursing school that fall, but life had other plans. Sophia's dad promised he'd help, but when things got hard, he disappeared. I've been working here for 3 years, saving money and taking night classes when I can." "Night classes?" Alexander asked. "Community college. I'm still trying to become a nurse. It's taking longer than I planned, but I'll get there. Sophia needs to see that her mom doesn't give up on her dreams." Alexander felt a deep respect for this woman that he'd never experienced before. Here he was, worth billions, complaining about 2 weeks of honest work. Luna had been fighting for years to build a better life for herself and her daughter, never giving up despite obstacles he couldn't even imagine. "How do you manage it all?" he asked genuinely. "You just do what you have to do," Luna said. "Sophia's counting on me. That makes everything else worth it." That afternoon, Alexander found himself working harder than he ever had. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He wanted to live up to Luna's example. He started noticing things he'd missed before, which customers needed extra attention, how to make someone's day a little brighter with genuine service. When a young mother came in with 2 crying toddlers, Alexander didn't just take her order. He brought coloring books and crayons from behind the counter, something he'd seen Luna do. The relief on the mother's face was worth more than any business deal he'd ever closed. By closing time, Alexander was exhausted, but felt something new. A sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with money or status. He'd made a difference in small ways throughout the day. He'd been useful in a way that mattered. As they cleaned up together, Luna smiled at him. "You're getting good at this. The customers are starting to ask for you specifically." Alexander felt a warmth spread through his chest. In his corporate life, praise was about profit margins and quarterly reports. Here it was about human connection and genuine care. Walking to his car that night, Alexander realized that Luna had taught him more about leadership in 1 week than all his business school professors combined. Real leadership wasn't about commanding from the top. It was about serving others even when they couldn't do anything for you in return. For the first time since the bet began, Alexander wasn't thinking about winning or losing. He was thinking about the woman who'd shown him what real strength looked like. Wednesday morning of Alexander's second week started like any other. He arrived at the diner feeling confident for the first time since he'd started. His hands no longer shook when carrying multiple plates, and he'd even started enjoying conversations with the regular customers. Mrs. Chen had complimented his coffee pouring technique, and Mr. Johnson had asked him about his weekend plans like they were old friends. Luna seemed distracted, though. She kept checking her phone between orders, which wasn't like her at all. During the morning rush, Alexander noticed her hands trembling slightly as she poured coffee, and she'd mixed up 2 orders, something he'd never seen her do. "Everything okay?" Alexander asked during a brief lull around 10 o'clock. Luna's phone buzzed, and she quickly checked it. Her face went pale as she read the message. "I have to go," she said, suddenly untying her apron with shaking fingers. "Sophia's school just called. She collapsed during recess. They're taking her to the hospital." Alexander's heart dropped. He'd heard Luna talk about Sophia every day. Her excitement about starting first grade, her love of drawing, her fear of thunderstorms. The little girl had become real to him through her mother's stories. "Go," Alexander said immediately. "Don't worry about anything here." "I can't just leave," Luna said, panic in her voice. "Tony will be furious. We're already short-staffed and the lunch rush is coming. I could lose my job." I'll cover for you, Alexander said without hesitation. Luna stared at him. Alex, you can't handle both sections. You've only been here a week and a half. I'll figure it out, Alexander said firmly. Sophia needs you. That's more important than anything else. Tony appeared from the kitchen, having overheard the conversation. What's going on? My daughter's in the hospital, Luna explained quickly. I know we're busy, but I have to go to her. Tony's expression softened. He'd been running this diner for 15 years and had seen his employees through divorces, deaths, and every kind of family crisis imaginable. Of course you have to go. Don't even think about the job right now. I'll work her section too, Alexander volunteered. Tony looked skeptical. Kid, that's 8 tables during lunch rush, are you sure? Alexander had never been less sure of anything in his life, but he nodded anyway. Luna trained me well. I can do this. After Luna rushed out, Alexander stood looking at the 2 sections he was now responsible for. 8 tables, during lunch rush. What had he gotten himself into? The first hour was chaos. Orders came faster than Alexander could write them down. Table 12 wanted their burger medium rare. Table 15 needed extra napkins for their toddler. Table 9 was ready for their check. And Table 11 had been waiting 10 minutes for their drink refills. Alexander ran between tables, his shirt soaked with sweat, trying to keep everyone happy. By 1 o'clock, he was drowning. He'd mixed up 2 orders, forgotten to bring Table 7 their side of fries, and completely lost track of which table had ordered the soup. His feet were screaming in pain and his back felt like it might give out. That's when Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman Luna always took special care of, waved him over to booth 4. Honey, you look like you're about to collapse, she said kindly. Where's Luna today? Her daughter's in the hospital, Alexander explained, refilling her coffee cup. Mrs. Patterson's expression immediately shifted to concern. Oh no, is the little one okay? I don't know yet, Alexander admitted. Luna just got the call this morning. Well then, you tell me how I can help, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. I've been coming here for 12 years. I know this place better than most. Alexander was confused. Help how? Table 6 has been trying to get your attention for 5 minutes. They need their check. Table 10 needs ketchup. And that young man at table 14 looks like he's in a hurry. Probably needs his order taken. Alexander realized Mrs. Patterson had been watching the entire dining room, keeping track of everyone's needs. I can't ask you to do that. You didn't ask. I offered, she said with a smile. Luna's always been good to us regulars. Now it's our turn to be good to her. Word spread quietly among the regular customers that Luna was dealing with a family emergency. Mr. Johnson started bussing his own table and even helped clear table 12 when the family left. Mrs. Chen got up to refill the napkin dispensers without being asked. The construction workers who usually demanded quick service became patient and understanding. Alexander had never seen anything like it. These customers weren't just tolerating slower service. They were actively helping. In his corporate world, any sign of weakness was exploited. Here, it brought out people's kindness. Around 3 o'clock, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Luna. Sophia has pneumonia. They're keeping her overnight for observation. Thank you for covering. I owe you everything. Alexander quickly typed back, don't worry about the diner. Focus on Sophia. Take as much time as you need. But even as he sent the message, Alexander was struggling. His body was beyond exhausted, and he still had 3 hours left on his shift. Every step hurt. Every order felt overwhelming. He was starting to understand what Luna meant when she said every dollar mattered. She couldn't afford to miss work, even when her daughter was sick. That evening, after the dinner rush finally ended, Alexander sat in his car outside the hospital. He'd looked up which one Sophia had been taken to and driven there without really thinking about why. Maybe he wanted to check on Luna, or maybe he just needed to see that the little girl was okay. He found Luna in the pediatric waiting area, still wearing her work uniform. She looked exhausted and worried, clutching a cup of cold coffee. Alex, she said, surprised to see him. What are you doing here? I wanted to make sure you were okay, Alexander said, sitting down beside her. How's Sophia? Luna's eyes filled, with tears. She's going to be fine. It's pneumonia, but they caught it early. She's sleeping now. She paused, then looked at him with gratitude. Tony told me you worked both sections all day. I can't believe you did that. Anyone would have done the same thing, Alexander said. No, Luna said firmly. Not everyone. You saved my job today. If I'd had to leave without coverage, Tony would have had to close half the diner. He's been good to me, but he's running a business. Alexander felt a weight in his chest. In his world, missing work for a sick child would be handled by assistants and backup plans. Luna lived one crisis away from losing everything. The hospital bills, Luna continued quietly. They're going to be expensive. Even with insurance, I'll probably have to pick up extra shifts. Maybe work weekends at another restaurant. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. This incredible woman, who worked harder than anyone he'd ever known, was going to have to work even more because her 6-year-old daughter got sick. The unfairness of it made him angry in a way he'd never experienced. Can I see her? Alexander asked. Luna looked surprised but nodded. She's been asking about the nice man from Mommy's work who helped today. They walked to Sophia's room together. The little girl was awake, looking tiny in the hospital bed, but with Luna's same bright eyes. When she saw Alexander, she smiled. Are you Alex? She asked in a small voice. I am, Alexander said, sitting carefully in the chair beside her bed. How are you feeling? Better. The doctor says I can go home tomorrow if I keep getting better. Sophia studied his face seriously. Mommy says you helped her today when I got sick. Your mom helps me every day, Alexander said honestly. She's teaching me how to do my job. Sophia nodded like this made perfect sense. Mommy's the best at taking care of people. She takes care of me when I'm sick, and she takes care of the customers when they're hungry. The simple wisdom of a 6-year-old hit Alexander harder than any business insight ever had. Luna wasn't just good at her job. She was good at caring for people. It was who she was, not just what she did. That night, Alexander lay awake in his penthouse apartment staring at the ceiling. 12 floors below, traffic hummed through the city. Somewhere across town, Luna was probably sleeping in an uncomfortable hospital chair, making sure Sophia wasn't scared. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander felt truly helpless. All his money, all his success, and he couldn't do anything to help the person who had taught him what real strength looked like. Or could he? By morning, Alexander had made a decision that would change everything. Thursday morning was Alexander's last day at the diner, though nobody else knew it yet. He arrived early, his stomach twisted with guilt and anticipation. Luna was back at work, looking tired but relieved. Sophia was home recovering with Luna's neighbor watching her. She keeps asking when you're coming to visit again, Luna told him as they set up for the morning shift. I think you made quite an impression. Alexander's heart clenched. He'd grown to care about this little girl he'd only met once, just like he'd grown to care about her mother in ways he never expected. The thought of disappearing from their lives after today felt like betrayal. Throughout the morning, Alexander found himself memorizing everything. The way Luna hummed while she worked, how she knew exactly how each regular customer liked their coffee, the sound of the bell when someone entered the diner. Tomorrow, he'd be back in his corporate world, and this would all feel like a dream. Around 11 o'clock, Tony approached him with an envelope. Your first paycheck, he said with a smile. You've turned out to be a pretty good worker, Alex. Where'd you say you worked before? Alexander took the envelope, feeling its light weight. Inside was a check for $237, his wages plus tips for nearly 2 weeks of work. In his real life, he spent more than that on lunch. But holding this check, earned through honest work and tired feet, felt more valuable than any business deal he'd ever closed. Thanks, Tony, Alexander said, avoiding the question about his previous work. This place has taught me a lot. During the lunch rush, a well-dressed businessman entered the diner. Alexander's blood ran cold when he recognized him. It was David Harrison, a rival CEO he'd competed against for years. David would recognize him instantly. Alexander quickly turned away, pretending to clean tables while keeping his head down. But it was too late. David had spotted him and was staring in shock. "Alexander," David called out, his voice carrying across the diner. "Alexander Chen? What the hell are you doing here?" The entire diner went quiet. Luna looked confused, staring between Alexander and the businessman. Tony raised his eyebrows. Other customers turned to watch the scene unfold. Alexander felt his face burning. His carefully constructed lie was crumbling in front of everyone who mattered to him here. "I'm sorry," Alexander said to David, his voice shaking. "You must have me confused with someone else." But David was already pulling out his phone, showing pictures to anyone who would look. "This is Alexander Chen, the billionaire. He owns Tech Global Industries. What's he doing working as a waiter?" Luna stepped closer, her face a mixture of confusion and growing hurt. "Alex? What's he talking about?" Alexander looked into her eyes and knew he couldn't lie anymore. Not to her. Not to the woman who had shown him what real integrity looked like. "Can we talk privately?" he asked Luna quietly. She nodded, still looking stunned, and they walked to the employee break room in the back. Alexander closed the door and turned to face her, knowing this conversation would change everything. "Is it true?" Luna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander nodded slowly. "My real name is Alexander Chen. I own a technology company. I'm worth about $12 billion. Luna sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs. "So this was all fake? The job, the struggle, getting to know us? It was all just some kind of game to you?" "No," Alexander said desperately. "It started as a bet with a friend, but it stopped being about that after the first day. Luna, everything I've felt here, everything I've learned from you, that's all real." "A bet?" Luna's voice was getting louder. "You've been lying to me for 2 weeks because of a bet?" Alexander tried to explain about Robert's challenge, about proving he could succeed at any job, but with each word Luna's expression grew colder. "So you thought you'd play poor person for 2 weeks and then go back to your real life?" she said, standing up. "Do you have any idea how insulting that is? While you were playing games, I was worried about paying rent, about Sophia's medical bills, about keeping this job that you were just treating like entertainment." "It wasn't entertainment," Alexander said, his voice breaking. "Luna, you changed my life. You showed me what real strength looks like, what genuine kindness means. I've never respected anyone the way I respect you. But you couldn't respect me enough to tell me the truth," Luna said, tears in her eyes now. "You let me worry about money, about Sophia's hospital bills, while you could have solved all of it with pocket change. You watched me struggle and said nothing." Alexander felt like his heart was being torn apart. "I wanted to help. Every day I wanted to help. But I knew if I told you who I really was, you'd think everything between us was fake." "Everything between us was fake," Luna said. "I thought I knew you. I thought you understood what it was like to work hard for every dollar, to worry about your future. But you were just a rich man playing dress-up." She opened the break room door, then turned back to him one last time. "I want you to leave. Don't come back. I don't want to see you again." Alexander stood alone in the break room for several minutes after Luna left, feeling more empty than he'd ever felt in his life. He'd won the bet. He'd lasted the full 2 weeks without quitting. But it felt like the biggest loss of his life. When he finally came out, the diner felt different. Luna was working his section as well as her own, refusing to look at him. Tony approached with a sympathetic expression. "Look, Alex, or Alexander, or whoever you are, I think it's best if you go," Tony said quietly. "Luna's upset, and the other customers are confused. Come back tomorrow for your last paycheck if you want." Alexander nodded numbly. He untied his apron for the last time and left it on the counter. Walking out of Rosie's place felt like leaving a piece of himself behind. 3 months later, Alexander sat in his office looking out at the city skyline. He'd won Robert's bet and donated the promised money to charity, but instead of feeling victorious, he'd started the largest workplace reform in his company's history. He'd raised minimum wages for all support staff, implemented comprehensive health care, and created an emergency assistance fund for employees facing crises. He'd also started a foundation dedicated to helping working parents, providing emergency childcare, medical assistance, and educational scholarships. Every day he thought about Luna and Sophia, wondering how they were doing. One evening, his assistant brought him a letter that had arrived with no return address. Inside was a simple card with a picture Sophia had drawn. Stick figures of 3 people standing outside a building that looked like a diner. One figure had Alex written underneath in crayon. With the drawing was a note from Luna. Sophia misses you. She doesn't understand why you stopped visiting. The foundation you started has helped 3 families from our neighborhood. I got accepted to nursing school full-time. The scholarship program made it possible. I'm still hurt by the lies, but I see you're trying to use your privilege for good. Maybe that's what matters. At the bottom, she'd written an address and time. Sophia's graduation from 1st grade, Saturday 7 p.m., if you want to come as yourself this time. Alexander stared at the invitation for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called his driver. It was time to stop hiding behind lies and start building something real. When he arrived at the school, Luna was standing outside in a simple blue dress, looking nervous. Sophia saw him first and ran over, her graduation cap slightly crooked. "Alex, you came," she said, hugging his legs. "Mommy said you were really busy being important." Alexander knelt down to her level. "Nothing is more important than celebrating your graduation," he said honestly. Luna approached slowly. "You came. I wouldn't miss it," Alexander said. "And Luna, I'd like to start over. No lies this time. Just the truth, if you'll give me that chance." Luna studied his face for a long moment. "The truth is harder than lying." "I'm learning that," Alexander said. "But some people are worth it." For the first time in months, Luna smiled at him. It was cautious, but it was real. And for Alexander, it felt like coming home.